The top stories from RT. The Pentagon threatens more measures against Russia over alleged cyber attacks, while the FBI admits it was refused access to the Democrat servers that were compromised.
Were you given access to do the forensics on those servers?
We were not.
Do you know why you were denied access to those servers?
I don't know for sure.
Accusations Russia compiled incriminating evidence against Donald Trump are slammed as fake news by both the US president-elect and Moscow. And a water shortage crisis leaves the Syrian capital in a dire humanitarian situation as the government and the rebels fight for control of the supply source. Live worldwide, this is RT International. My name's Colin Bray. A warm welcome to the programme. First, the Pentagon is threatening further measures against Russia over alleged meddling in last year's US election. Senators are also pushing for action against Moscow as the head of the FBI admits his agency was denied access to the Democratic Party servers during their investigation.
Some responses have been made. I think you should regard that as a start and not the end.
Were you given access to do the forensics on those servers?
We were not. We were a highly respected private company, eventually got access and shared with us what they saw there.
Was there one request or multiple requests?
Multiple requests at different levels, and ultimately what was agreed to is the private company would share with us what they saw.
Do you know why you were denied access to those servers?
I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure.
James Comey and 3 other directors of US intelligence agencies were testifying to the US Senate on the recent report that claimed Moscow meddled in the presidential election. It was widely criticized for its lack of evidence. Gayana Chichikan has more on what was said during the Senate hearing.
Director of National Intelligence James Clapper said that they had multiple sources indicating that the Russian government was behind the hacking and the leaking of Democratic Party emails to help Donald Trump. He was asked whether all 3 agencies that signed on to the intelligence report released to the public last week had the same degree of confidence. As you remember, according to the report, the CIA and the FBI had high degree of confidence, while the NSA, which focuses on electronic eavesdropping, had moderate confidence. Director Clapper has refused to publicly speak to the reason why the difference here.
Is there any disagreements on the involvement that Russia has had in, or their attempts to have in this process of our elections by any of the intelligence community? Did any of you have different takes on this or have to collaborate in order to come to one conclusion?
There was one aspect that there was a difference in confidence levels held by NSA versus the rest of us on one single aspect. I'd be more comfortable discussing that in a closed session.
He also claimed it was a holistic effort by the Russian government to influence the election. U.S. intelligence chiefs have once again expressed high degree of confidence in their judgment that the Russian president ordered the hacking and the leaking of Democratic Party emails to help Donald Trump.
We sounded out a number of experts to ask why publishing the evidence against Russia is proving to be so problematic for the U.S. intelligence community.
If this hacking actually took place, there would be an electronic trail back to the point of origin. We haven't seen any electronic trail. We haven't heard anything coming from the director of NSA saying that there had been a successful hack. And so it just leads me to believe that the evidence doesn't exist. In the absence of facts, they turn it over to the analysts. And the analysts make analytic conclusions based on the bits and pieces that they are able to collect. That's what we have here. We have something that has been massaged by the CIA's analysts, and they've drawn analytic conclusions based on what little evidence they have.
The report further goes on to say we can trace them by the way they do their work and the specific malware that they use. This is also nonsense. Once a piece of malware has been used, it ends up in the dark web, and hundreds of thousands of hackers are now using that. Just because someone uses a piece of malware does not mean it was the malware's creator. We know the malware that was used. We know that the fact it had Russian language in it. We know all of these things that could not possibly be there if it were really the Russians. So whether they had access to the server or not, common sense tells you, just based on public knowledge, that it cannot possibly be the Russian government. Now, it may be a Russian, could be a 15-year-old kid. Certainly not the Russian intelligence services. This is way too unsophisticated.
What we have now is we have the Democrats, they likened it to 9/11. Which is really troublesome and really concerning, because in the case of 9/11, the FBI or the United States went to war as a result of 9/11. So it's really not something to be taken lightly.
RT also featured at the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing on Russian meddling, presented as one of the most prominent peddlers of Moscow's supposed agenda.
Russian propaganda media outlets like RT.
I don't want to defend RT. Trolls, propaganda arm of a government, hacking.
RT actually has a bigger presence in the United States than the BBC.
National Intelligence Director James Clapper joined the chorus against RT. However, when he was asked a question about RT's reach in America, he seemed unsure.
China continues to succeed.
Director Clapper, does RT get any of its broadcast into the United States?
Yes, it does some.
It does?
It's very prevalent in Europe and lesser so. I think there's an RT channel here.
What was fascinating, I watched the hearing, was not just what James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, said, but how he said it, with barely controlled rage, deep anger. This is a twin assault, a twin-pronged assault. The first is to discredit RT and get it off the air. The second is to tar critics of the corporate state. If you turn on any cable channel from CNN to MSNBC or anywhere else, they are calling this a blockbuster report. They give credibility to it as if it's already been proven. And I spent 15 years at the New York Times. I find this very frightening. It is essentially acting as a kind of megaphone for government allegations, which I don't know whether Russia hacked the John Podesta emails or not. What I do know is that there has not been any, evidence of any form.
CNN's been headlining a story on Donald Trump that alleges that Russia has accumulated a dossier of incriminating evidence against him.
The nation's top intelligence officials provided information to President-elect Donald Trump and to President Barack Obama last week about claims of Russian efforts to compromise President-elect Trump.
That story was picked up by BuzzFeed News. Ilya Petrenko joined me a little earlier to explain more about that.
Well, it sounds like such a juicy thing, news that could wake you up. An unbelievable story. The FSB, Russia's secret agents that are meant to be Donald Trump's friends, now compromising him while he was in Moscow, and they're saying that it is sufficient enough to be able to blackmail him later. It is in the news, on TV. The likes of CNN are running it first story, but hold on, there are disclaimers and tags unverified all over the place.
The FBI has not confirmed many essential details. They have not established the veracity, but they are taking a look. We cannot confirm.
It's a very sensitive investigation, obviously. We don't know whether it includes, who it includes.
What we know is that the top intelligence officials of this nation provided some information that they believe came from a credible source.